Shabbat shalom, everybody. Sorry, I was deep in thought. Thought you'd get a kick out of that. Rabbi Stephen here, folks, with this week's 10-minute Torah. Hope you're doing well. Um, and this week we continue our portions, and this week we are going to be reading Behar. Now, I want to thank everybody that covered for me last week when Rachel and I were gone. We were out visiting some friends. It was wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thank you. As you know, I don't take a lot of those because of responsibilities. This is what I do. This is what I do. I work for you. And quite frankly, I love what I do. And I hope you love what I do for you. And if you don't, and I want to emphasize this, please let me know if there's a prayer you like more than the others that like to see more of, because as you know, I like to rotate different prayers. If there's a melody, and people have come to me and asked me to use different melodies, and I've done my best to accommodate that. So, and I appreciate that. Some of you feel, well, I'm the rabbi. It's up to me, and yes, it is. But you know what? I see this as a partnership. We're in this together. As a rabbi, yes, I am the Maradatra, which means I'm the master of the house. But I am also an officiator. The Maradatra really refers to my legal status, because up until a few hundred years ago, rabbis mostly were halakhic authorities. They basically were consulted on matters of Jewish law. And if you've ever looked at the Talmud, any part of it, there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of interpretation. And interestingly enough, the rabbis don't always agree on anything. Um, Case in point, as we all know, we don't eat meat and milk together. We don't do meat and dairy. So you would never have a cheeseburger. Yet there was sort of a gray area because, as you know, fish, which is a living being, is considered part. You can eat it cheese or no cheese, meat or milk, doesn't matter. You can have a surf and turf. You can have, I don't know, say cod and a kosher steak. And you can have a fish with milk or cheese on it, right? The question was, what about fowl? What about chicken, turkey? They don't wean their young. They lay an egg. The egg is fertilized. And by the way, what about eggs? If eggs come from a creature, is an egg meat or milk? It turns out that an egg, especially an unfertilized egg, is also considered part, which means either meat or dairy. That's okay. But what about chicken, for example? Can you have a chicken salad sandwich with whatever dairy may be on it, like cheese? And today, halakhic authorities, rabbis will tell you, no, it's considered meat. But I will tell you that back in the Talmudic times, yes, there was a Rabbi Gamliel who said that his disciples, his students, can have chicken and meat and milk. They're not meat, he thought. So he made that ruling. So, but again, interesting stuff. So speaking of interesting stuff, let's talk about Behar. God talked to Moses on Mount Sinai. Behar Sinai. Har is hill um, or mountain. Basically, it concerns the idea of slaves and what do we do with them. Now, yes, Jews are allowed to own an alien slave, and they're allowed to own the slave and their family. And of course, as you all know, there are specific rules of treatment. We respect slaves. They're still people. They might be indebted to you, they might be working for you, but they still have rights. That's the way Judaism is. We're a very humane religion. The interesting part is, what if one of your brothers or sisters is on hard times and has to sell themselves into slavery, into servitude, because no way, no how, they've tried every single way to make a living, to work their land or with their cattle, and things just haven't worked out for them. They're in dire straits. So they have two choices. They can either starve to death, or they can sell their land and go be indentured to a master. So a lot of times when somebody is sold into slavery to pay off a debt, either a crime or something else, at the seventh year, that's it. They're released and they're given gifts and they've paid off their debt. They also something called the Jubilee or Yoval, which actually means ram's horn. But at the 50th year, uh, I believe it was at the end of Yom Kippur, they sound the horn and slaves go free. Not only do slaves go free, but the land goes free. So there's two levels of slavery here. There's someone who is indentured for one reason or another for a longer period of time. And then there's someone who's basically paying off a debt or someone or whatever. But the land was given to the tribes on day one of entering the land, and that is their land. This is why it's kind of difficult for the stranger. Somebody decides to become an Israelite, they don't have any ancestral land. And that's why a lot of our tzedakah, a lot of our justice of charity, of giving, involves the stranger. They don't have any really means of living. Now, they do, because if somebody owns a lot of land or they're very, very successful, they need people to help them work it. There are also trades, right? There's the smithing, the ironsmithing, whatever. There's horseshoeing, whatever they did back then, fixing wagons. Maybe they did it themselves, or maybe somebody was very good at carpentry or whatever, and they hired themselves out as labor. So they had a trade. Um, but the original Israelites, going all the way back 3,500 years, 3,200 years, we all have a share in Israel. So if you were down on your luck and you had to sell your land in order to try and make a living or try to get some money so you could support your family, and then you had to go into servitude in order to make a living to support yourself. On that 50th year, you or your heirs get that land back. So if you're in a multi-generational servitude situation where you had to go into servitude, and now your family, your offspring are in the same situation. At that point, here's your land back. Thank you. Yes, there is a payment. Things don't just happen free, but they deduct the amount of time and they figure out the wages based on the production, and you get your due. The master gets the due, you get your land, and bam, everything's made equal. This is a very critical and important part of Jewish law. Everything needs to be fair. At the end of this particular portion, or at the end of last portion, I will say, and this is kind of an interesting lead up, because at the end of Amor, we have lex talionis, the law of the tally. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, wound for wound, burn for burn, foot for foot, life for life. Everything has to be fair. Now, this has been an idea for contention. Yes, unfortunately, we Jews have had enemies throughout the ages. Some people contend that we are a nation of priests. We're held to a higher standard. Other people say, how high does that standard need to be? We're still people. So, an interesting contention, but there are people who didn't like us for whatever reason. And that's the topic of something that we're not going to discuss today. But people used that and said, oh, look how cruel these Jews are. If somebody loses a tooth, somebody knocks out somebody's tooth, maybe it's by accident, well, I guess they have to lose their tooth. No. Two reasons. First of all, because of the context of that law, it was considered to be a financial compensation, basically what I believe in law they call a tort. So you're compensated for your loss. And I guess they have various ways of deciding how to do that. The other thing is that if a master loses his or her temper, or cool, if you will, and strikes a slave, causing them a damage, knocks out their tooth, blinds their eye, causes them to be lame, that slave, it's a get out of jail free card. They all have their freedom. And of course, they're sent away with gifts, etc., as if. The point is that the sages understand there is no way. And I would even suggest talking to a modern medical person like a doctor and saying, is there a way you can medically, physically cause the same damage that that person caused on that person? And the answer is probably going to be no. There's no, you can't do it. I mean, you have to be so exact. Okay. And back then, 3,000 years ago, they didn't have any tools that we have today. How do you remove somebody's eye so that they don't bleed to death, right? And now there's another level of issues. So anyway, it's all about compensation and it's all about humanity. And it's all about treating people further that are the most vulnerable in society. Shabbat Shalom. Look forward to seeing you again now that I'm back. And thank you.